The ocean floor swallows all light past a certain point. 6 miles down, in the coldest, darkest place on our planet, scientists found something breathing. Something that should not exist. A creature with skin so thin you can see its heart beating through it. Bones that never fully harden. A body built to survive pressure strong enough to crush a submarine like a soda can. This is the Hadal snailfish, and it lives where an SUV's weight presses down on every square inch of its body. We're diving past sunken ships, past the reach of whales, into a trench deeper than Mount Everest is tall turned upside down. Along the way, you will meet a hunter with no eyes that still might sense light, a chemical shield hiding inside every cell, and trash from the surface world buried at the bottom of the earth. Scientists are still trying to explain how life like this survives at all. If this kind of content pulls you in, hit subscribe so you don't miss what else is hiding down here. Take a breath. We are going down where the ocean stops making sense. A cable unwinds into the dark. Slowly, foot by foot, a steel sphere sinks past the last traces of sunlight. Above, the ocean still glows faint blue. Below, there is nothing but black. The submersible passes 1 mile down, then 2, then 3. The pressure outside climbs with every foot. Inside the cabin, the crew watches numbers rise on a screen, each one higher than anything a human body could survive unprotected. At 4 miles, the water outside could snap steel beams like twigs. At 5 miles, the cabin creaks under a force strong enough to fold a school bus flat. The pilot keeps their eyes on the sonar, waiting for the seafloor to appear. Nobody speaks much at this depth. There is a kind of quiet that settles in when you know one crack in the hull means the end. Then, at nearly 6 miles down, the sonar pings. The bottom is close. The pilot flips on the exterior lights, and beams cut through water that has not seen sunlight in millions of years. For a moment, the crew expects mud, rock, and nothing else. This is the Hadal Zone, the deepest layer of the ocean, named after Hades, the underworld. Scientists once believed nothing complex could live here. Too cold, too dark, too much weight pressing down from miles of seawater above. But something moves in the light. A pale shape drifts near the camera lens. It is soft, almost see-through, with fins that ripple like a plastic bag caught in slow motion. It does not dart away in fear. It simply glides, as if this crushing, lightless world is exactly where it belongs. The crew leans closer to the monitor. Nobody expected to find a fish here. Not at this depth, not under this much pressure, not in a place where the laws of biology seem to break down. This moment did not happen by accident. Teams of scientists spent years building submersibles tough enough to survive the Hadal Zone, then sent them down specifically to search for life in trenches once thought empty. What they found rewrote a page in biology textbooks. A living, breathing vertebrate animal thriving nearly 6 miles beneath the waves in conditions that would kill almost anything else on Earth within seconds. To understand why this matters, picture the deepest point in the ocean, a trench called the Challenger Deep. If you dropped Mount Everest into it, the peak would still sit more than a mile underwater. That is how far down this creature lives. That is the world it calls home. Scientists studying this fish are not just curious. They are hunting for answers about the very limits of life itself. If something can survive here, in a place this hostile, it forces us to rethink what impossible really means. It also raises a bigger question about our own planet, and maybe about other planets too. If life can exist in conditions this extreme on Earth, what else might be surviving in places we assumed were dead? The creature caught on camera that day has a name now. Scientists call it the Hadal snailfish. But its name is the easy part. The harder question is how its body manages to survive down here at all, and the deeper the researchers looked, the stranger the answers became. Picture holding a plastic sandwich bag full of water. Now imagine that bag had a face, fins, and a beating heart you could actually see through its skin. That is close to what researchers saw the first time cameras caught a Hadal snailfish up close. Its body looked less like a typical fish and more like a soft pink balloon drifting through the dark. Most fish have hard scales, thick muscle, and a skeleton built like a frame to hold everything in place. The Hadal snailfish has almost none of that. Its skin is thin and see-through. Its muscles are soft and loose. Even its bones feel more like flexible cartilage than solid bone. To anyone trained in ocean biology, this looked wrong. Fish that's soft usually cannot survive outside a fish tank, let alone 6 miles under the sea, yet there it was, calmly swimming through one of the most hostile places on the planet. Scientists began studying dead specimens brought up in traps, and then later, filming live ones directly on the seafloor using deep-sea landers. Every detail confirmed the same strange pattern. This fish had almost none of the typical armour other deep-sea animals use for protection. No thick scales, no hardened skull, no dense bones. In a place where the pressure could flatten a steel drum, this creature looked like it was built out of jelly. At first, some researchers wondered if the fish only survived by staying still, avoiding any stress on its fragile body. But footage told a different story. The Hadal snailfish moved with surprising grace, gliding along the seafloor, poking its head into pockets of sediment, hunting for food. It behaved less like a fragile survivor and more like a creature perfectly at home in its surroundings. This is where biology gets interesting. In most environments, being soft and thin-skinned is a disadvantage. Predators can bite through you easily. Pressure can crush you. But 6 miles down, the rules change completely. There is so much water pressing down from every direction that a rigid, hard body would actually work against survival. A soft, flexible body bends with the pressure instead of fighting it. Where a stiff structure might crack under the load, a squishy one simply adjusts. Think of squeezing a rubber ball versus squeezing a glass ball. The rubber ball survives. The glass one shatters. This single realization reshaped how scientists think about survival in extreme places. Being weak on the surface can mean being perfectly adapted somewhere else. The Hadal snailfish is not broken or unfinished. It is precisely engineered by millions of years of evolution for a world most animals could never enter. But softness alone does not explain everything. A jelly-like body might handle pressure well, yet pressure is only one threat in the Hadal zone. Cold water, crushing darkness, and almost no food still remain. Something else inside this fish had to be doing extra work to keep it alive, and that answer was hiding deep inside its very cells. Numbers alone rarely mean much. Saying something weighs 1,000 times more than normal does not hit hard unless you can picture it. So picture this instead. Take an SUV, the kind parked in driveways across the country, and balance its entire weight on the tip of one finger. That is roughly the pressure squeezing every inch of the Hadal snailfish's body, 6 miles beneath the ocean surface. Pressure in the ocean builds the deeper you go. At sea level, the air around you presses down at a steady, comfortable rate. Your body barely notices it, because you have spent your whole life inside it. Go underwater, though, and things change fast. For every 100 feet you sink, the pressure jumps by about 1.5 times what you feel on land. By the time you reach 6 miles down, the pressure is roughly 8 tons pushing on every square inch. That number is almost impossible to picture, so try this instead. Imagine stacking 50 cars on top of a single postage stamp. That is close to the force acting on the smallest patch of skin at this depth. Human bodies are not built for this. If a person somehow sank to the bottom of the Mariana Trench without protection, their body would be crushed instantly, not slowly, not painfully over time, instantly. Submarines built for military use max out at depth far shallower than this trench, their hulls groaning under stress long before reaching the bottom. Only specialized submersibles built with thick titanium shells shaped like perfect spheres can survive the trip. So how does a soft, thin-skinned fish manage what steel struggles to do? The trick lies in a simple fact of physics. Solid, hollow objects like submarines and human lungs are dangerous underwater because they contain air pockets. Air compresses under pressure, and when it compresses unevenly, it creates weak points that can collapse. The Hadal snailfish avoids this problem almost completely. It has no swim bladder, the gas-filled organ most fish use to control buoyancy. Without that pocket of air, there is nothing inside its body for the pressure to crush. Its body is instead made almost entirely of water and soft tissue, and water does not compress the way air does. Since the pressure inside the fish's body roughly matches the pressure of the water outside, there is no dangerous imbalance. The fish is not fighting the ocean. It is matching it, pressure for pressure. like two hands pressing evenly against each other instead of one pushing harder than the other. This single design choice, no swim bladder, no trapped air, explains a big part of the mystery, but it raises a new question just as strange. If the fish's body is built to survive crushing pressure, what about its blood, its proteins, its DNA? Pressure this extreme can bend and break molecules just as easily as it can crush bone. Somewhere inside this animal's cell, something else had to be working overtime to keep its biology from falling apart, and that answer would turn out to be even stranger than the fish itself. Every record has a holder, and in the deep sea, this fish holds one of the strangest titles in the animal kingdom. The Hadal snailfish is the deepest living fish ever recorded, filmed alive at depths beyond 26,000 feet. To put that number into a picture, that is roughly 19 Empire State Buildings stacked one on top of another, then dropped straight down into the ocean. Scientists first identified this species after years of expeditions to the Mariana Trench, the deepest known place on Earth. Traps baited with fish parts were lowered on cables for hours, sometimes overnight before being hauled back up. When researchers pulled up the first specimens, they found a fish that looked almost nothing like the sturdy scaled fish most people picture. Its body was pale pink, nearly translucent, with a wide head and a tapering tail, shaped a bit like a tadpole crossed with a teardrop. Naming a new species is not just about appearance. Scientists spent time confirming this fish was truly distinct from other snailfish species living in shallower water. They studied its genetics, its skeleton, and its behaviour before officially describing it. The name they chose reflects exactly where it lives, tying it directly to the Hadal Zone, the deepest layer of ocean on the planet. What makes this fish remarkable is not just the depth record itself, but what that record represents. For decades, scientists debated whether any fish could survive below a certain depth at all. Some researchers believed there was a hard biological limit, a point so deep that fish simply could not function, no matter how well adapted they were. The Hadal snailfish shattered that idea. It proved that vertebrate life, animals with a backbone and spinal cord like humans, dogs, and every fish you have ever seen, could exist far beyond where scientists once drew the line. Video footage sealed the discovery. Deep-sea landers equipped with cameras and lights were dropped into the trench and left to record for hours. When researchers reviewed the footage back on the surface, they watched the fish swim gracefully through the frame, seemingly unbothered by a location that should have destroyed it. It approached bait, investigated its surroundings, and moved with a kind of casual confidence that surprised everyone watching. This calm behaviour matters. A fragile, barely surviving creature would likely stay motionless, conserving energy, avoiding any unnecessary stress. Instead, the Hadal snailfish behaved like a predator fully in control of its environment. It hunted. It explored. It lived a full, active life in a place most animals could not survive for even a few seconds. Discoveries like this reset the map of where life can exist. Every time scientists think they have found the edge of what biology can handle, something like the Hadal snailfish appears to push that edge further out. And once researchers confirmed exactly how deep this fish could go, the next question became obvious. If pressure alone should stop a skeleton from working properly, how does this fish's body hold together at all? The answer waiting inside its bones would turn out to be one of the strangest survival tricks in the entire animal kingdom. Bones exist for a reason. They hold bodies upright, protect organs, and give muscles something firm to pull against. On land, and even in shallow water, a strong, hard skeleton is one of the best survival tools evolution ever built. 6 miles down, that same strength becomes a serious problem. Hard bone is dense and rigid. It resists bending, which works well under normal pressure. But at extreme depths, rigid structures behave differently than soft ones. Instead of flexing evenly under pressure the way water does, hard materials develop stress points, tiny areas where force concentrates instead of spreading out. Over time, or sometimes instantly, those stress points can crack or shatter. Think of a glass bottle underwater. Push down evenly on all sides and eventually the glass fails at its weakest spot. Not because it lacks strength, but because rigid materials cannot adjust to pressure the way flexible ones can. A skeleton built like steel scaffolding would face the same danger at Hadal depths, no matter how thick or strong it seemed near the surface. This creates a real problem for any fish trying to live this deep. A body needs some structure to move, hunt, and function. But too much rigid structure becomes a liability once the pressure climbs high enough. Most fish species simply cannot handle both demands at once, which is part of why so few animals live in the Hadal zone at all. The Hadal snailfish solved this problem in an unusual way. Instead of building a stronger skeleton to fight the pressure, its body abandoned the fight altogether. Its bones remained soft and underdeveloped throughout its entire life, more like flexible cartilage than solid bone. Even its skull, the part of the body that normally protects the brain with a hard-closed case, stays open and incomplete. This might sound dangerous, and in a shallow water fish it would be. A soft skull offers little protection from predators or rough surfaces. But 6 miles down, in near total darkness and crushing pressure, the biggest threat is not a predator's bite. It is the water pressure itself, and a flexible structure handles that threat far better than a hard one ever could. Researchers studying the Hadal snailfish's skeleton describe it as almost paused mid-development, frozen at a stage most fish grow out of quickly. Yet this is not a flaw or a birth defect. It is a specific evolutionary trait, one that took countless generations to develop and refine. The fish is not incomplete. It is precisely shaped by an environment where a traditional skeleton would be a death sentence. This raises a bigger question about evolution itself. Traits considered weaknesses in one environment can become superpowers in another. A soft skull would doom a fish living near the surface, exposed to predators and rough terrain. In the crushing dark of the Hadal zone, that same soft skull becomes one of the smartest survival tools on the planet. And this is only the first piece of the puzzle, because the skull is just the beginning of how this fish's entire skeleton had to change to survive. Every growing animal follows a blueprint. Bones start soft, then slowly harden as the body matures, a process called ossification. In humans, this continues well into the 20s, as cartilage gradually converts into dense, calcium-rich bone. Most fish follow a similar path, ending up with skeletons firm enough to support fast swimming and structural protection. The Hadal snailfish breaks this pattern entirely. Scientists studying its skeleton discovered something unusual buried in its genetic code. A gene responsible for hardening bone, one nearly every vertebrate relies on, does not work properly in this fish. The result is a skeleton that never fully hardens, staying soft and flexible from birth through adulthood. This is not simply a case of the fish growing slower than others. The gene itself carries a specific mutation that stops it from doing its job correctly, almost like a switch stuck in the off position. In most animals, this kind of mutation would be a serious problem, leading to broken bones, poor mobility, or an early death. In the Hadal snailfish, the opposite happened. This mutation became one of the keys to its survival. Picture the difference between a stiff wooden ruler and a flexible rubber ruler. Bend the wooden one too far, and it snaps. Bend the rubber one, and it simply flexes back into shape. At crushing Hadal depths, a skeleton built like the wooden ruler would fracture under pressure almost immediately. A skeleton built like the rubber one absorbs and adapts to that same pressure without breaking. This single genetic change reshaped nearly everything about how the fish's body functions. Its spine remains flexible enough to bend smoothly as it swims. Its skull stays soft enough to avoid dangerous stress points. Even small bones throughout its body stay pliable rather than rigid, giving the entire skeleton a kind of built-in shock absorption system that hard bone could never provide. Scientists studying deep-sea evolution describe this as a striking example of how a single genetic tweak can completely transform an animal's relationship with its environment. Change one gene, and a skeleton that would be a liability on the surface becomes a survival advantage 6 miles underwater. This discovery also hints at something bigger. If one small genetic mutation can unlock survival in one of the most hostile environments on Earth, similar hidden mutations might exist in other extreme adapted species, waiting to be discovered. Scientists studying human bone diseases have even expressed interest in genes like this one, since understanding how bone hardening can be turned off safely in one species might eventually offer clues about bone disorders in humans. The Hadal snailfish did not evolve a weaker skeleton by accident. It evolved a completely different survival strategy, trading strength for flexibility in a place where flexibility matters more than anything else. But bones are only part of the story. A body needs more than a flexible frame to survive here. It needs organs and internal chemistry built to handle the same crushing forces, and that search leads straight into one of the strangest features of this fish's entire body, the way its skull refuses to ever fully close. In most animals, the skull is the ultimate defense system. Bone plates fuse together early in life, sealing the brain inside a hard, protective case. This design makes sense almost everywhere on Earth. A closed skull protects against impacts, bites, and falls. For the Hadal snailfish, that same closed design would work against it. Researchers examining preserved specimens noticed something strange the moment they looked closely at the skull. Instead of solid, fused bone plates, the Hadal snailfish has gaps, areas where the skull simply never finishes closing. Its brain sits inside a structure that looks incomplete compared to nearly every other vertebrate on the planet. At first glance, this seems like a serious weakness. A skull with open gaps offers less physical protection. Yet in the crushing pressure of the Hadal zone, physical impact is rarely the threat. The real danger comes from pressure itself, squeezing evenly from every direction at once. A solid, closed skull, built to resist a single hard blow, is poorly designed to handle pressure pushing in from all sides simultaneously. Think about a sealed jar dropped into deep water versus an open-ended tube. The sealed jar traps air inside, creating a dangerous pressure difference between inside and outside. As the jar sinks, that difference can cause it to implode. An open tube, on the other hand, allows water to move freely, equalizing pressure on both sides. There is no trapped air pocket to create a dangerous imbalance. The Hadal snailfish's open skull works on a similar principle. Its incomplete structure allows pressure to distribute more evenly around the brain and surrounding tissue, avoiding the kind of dangerous pressure differences that could cause a sealed structure to fail. Instead of resisting the crushing force of the deep sea, the skull essentially lets the pressure pass through and around it safely. This adaptation connects directly to the fish's overall body plan. Just as its bones stay soft instead of hardening, its skull follows the same pattern, favouring flexibility and pressure equalization over rigid protection. Every part of its skeleton seems to follow one central rule: survive by bending with the environment rather than fighting against it. Scientists studying this feature note that it likely comes with real trade-offs. A more open, less protected skull could leave the brain more vulnerable in other situations, such as an attack from a larger predator. But in the Hadal zone, predators capable of threatening this fish are rare, and the environment itself, cold, dark, and crushing, poses a far greater daily threat than teeth ever could. Evolution, in this case, chose to protect against the danger that mattered most. This pattern of trading traditional protection for pressure survival appears throughout the Hadal snailfish's entire body. But bones and skulls are only the physical framework. Somewhere deeper, inside the fish's actual cells, an entirely different kind of defense system had to be working just as hard, protecting the delicate molecules that keep every living cell functioning properly under conditions that should tear them apart. It would be easy to look at the Hadal snailfish and assume it's simply never finished evolving properly, stuck somewhere between a young, developing fish and a fully grown one. That assumption would be wrong, and understanding why reveals something powerful about how evolution actually works. Evolution does not create perfect designs. It creates designs that work well enough in a specific environment to help a species survive and reproduce. A trait considered weak or unfinished in one setting can become remarkably effective in another. The Hadal snailfish's soft skeleton is not a mistake frozen in time. It is a precisely tuned solution shaped by millions of years living in one of the most extreme environments on the planet. Consider how differently the same trait plays out in two settings. Near the ocean surface, where fish face fast predators, rocky terrain, and strong currents, a soft, poorly hardened skeleton would be a serious disadvantage. Predators could easily injure a fish with a weak structural frame. Rough environments could damage fragile bones. In that world, hard, dense bone offers a clear survival advantage. 6 miles down, none of those pressures exist in the same way. There are few large predators. There is no rocky surf pounding against the seafloor. The dominant force shaping survival here is pressure itself, a force that punishes rigid structures and rewards flexible ones. In this environment, the same soft skeleton that would fail near the surface becomes the ideal design. This idea, that the same trait can be a weakness in one place and a strength in another, sits at the heart of how evolution shapes life across the planet. Species are not judged against some universal standard of strength or perfection. They are judged only against the specific challenges of their own environment. The Hadal snailfish is not a failed attempt at building a normal fish. It is a highly specialized, successful solution to a problem few other species have ever managed to solve. Scientists sometimes describe this kind of adaptation as evolutionary trade-off, gaining an advantage in one area by giving up an advantage in another. The Hadal snailfish traded strength and physical protection for flexibility and pressure tolerance, a trade that makes perfect sense once you understand where it lives. In a hostile world with almost no light and few predators, the biggest daily battle is not survival against attack. It is survival against the crushing weight of the ocean itself. This same principle appears across nature, from cave-dwelling animals that lose their eyesight to desert plants that abandon leaves to save water. Every extreme environment forces trade-offs, and the species that thrive are the ones that make the right trade for their specific world. The Hadal snailfish made its trade at the skeletal level, and it worked. But a flexible skeleton alone cannot protect the trillions of tiny molecules inside every cell of its body. Pressure this extreme threatens more than bones. It threatens the basic chemistry of life itself, and the fish's answer to that threat turned out to be even stranger than its bones. Hold a flashlight against the back of your hand, and a faint red glow might show through your skin. Now imagine that effect taken to an extreme, where nearly your entire body becomes see-through, organs and all. That is close to what the Hadal snailfish looks like up close. Its skin has almost no pigment, appearing pale pink or nearly clear under bright light. Beneath that thin layer, researchers can often see internal structures, including parts of its digestive system, without needing to cut the animal open at all. For a species living in a place with zero natural light, this raises an obvious question. Why does it matter what this fish looks like at all? The answer lies in understanding what pigment actually does. Skin colour in most animals serves a purpose, whether that is camouflage to hide from predators, warning colours to signal danger, or protection from sunlight. All three of these functions become useless in the Hadal zone. There is no sunlight to block. There is no visual predator scanning for colour patterns, since almost nothing down here can see well enough to hunt by sight in the first place. In total darkness, colour becomes irrelevant. Producing pigment costs energy. Skin cells that generate colour require resources that could otherwise go toward more important survival functions in a place where food is scarce and hard to find. Over countless generations, fish living in this extreme environment likely lost the ability to produce strong pigmentation simply because it stopped mattering. Evolution rarely maintains a costly trait once it no longer provides a benefit. This pattern shows up again and again throughout deep-sea biology. Many creatures living below the reach of sunlight lose pigment entirely, along with other traits tied closely to life in bright, visible environments. The Hadal snailfish fits neatly into this broader pattern, a species shaped by an environment where colour simply does not matter anymore. Its transparent skin also offers scientists a rare advantage. Instead of dissecting every specimen to study internal organs, researchers can sometimes observe digestive activity, organ position, and even signs of recent feeding directly through the skin. This transparency has made the Hadal snailfish an unusually useful subject for understanding how deep-sea animals process food and survive on limited energy. There is something almost unsettling about an animal built this openly, nothing hidden, nothing disguised. In a world obsessed with camouflage and defense, the Hadal snailfish simply stopped bothering. It does not need to hide from predators it rarely encounters. It does not need colour it will never be seen wearing. Every ounce of energy it saves by skipping pigment production can instead go towards simply staying alive in one of the harshest environments on the planet, but skin and bones only explain part of how this fish survives. The deepest, strangest secret is not visible at all, even through transparent skin. It lives inside every single cell, in the chemistry that keeps proteins from collapsing under pressure that would destroy ordinary biology within seconds. Most fish wear armour. Scales overlap like tiny shields, protecting soft tissue underneath from scrapes, bites, and rough terrain. Walk into any pet store and run a finger along a goldfish, and you will feel that layer of protection immediately. The Hadal snailfish has almost none of this. Its skin is smooth, loose, and mostly bare, offering none of the defense that scales typically provide. On the surface, or in shallow reefs, losing scales would likely be a death sentence. Predators would tear into unprotected flesh easily. Sharp coral and rocky terrain would scrape and injure exposed skin. Scales exist because the ocean near the surface is a dangerous competitive place, filled with creatures constantly testing each other's defences. 6 miles down, that competition mostly disappears. Few animals live at these depths at all, and even fewer are built to actively hunt something the size of a hadal snailfish. The seafloor here is soft, made of fine sediment rather than jagged rock, so there is little risk of physical injury from the environment itself. Without predators to fear and without rough terrain to navigate, the evolutionary pressure that normally favours thick scales simply is not present. This absence of danger changes the entire calculation. Building and maintaining scales cost energy and biological resources the same way producing skin pigment does. In a place where food is scarce and every calorie matters, wasting resources on unnecessary armour makes little sense. Losing scales likely freed up energy the hadal snailfish could redirect toward more useful adaptations, like managing pressure or supporting slow, careful movement across the seafloor. There is a bigger lesson hiding in this detail. Every physical trait an animal carries comes with a cost, and evolution constantly weighs that cost against the benefit. Scales are incredibly useful in a world full of teeth and rocks. They become deadweight in a world with neither. The hadal snailfish did not become vulnerable by losing its scales. It became efficient, shedding a costly defense it no longer needed in exchange for saving energy it actually does need. This idea connects back to everything discovered so far about this strange fish. Soft bones, an open skull, transparent skin, and now, bare, scaleless flesh. Each trait on its own might look like weakness. Together, they form a consistent pattern, a body stripped down to only what matters for survival in one of the most extreme environments on Earth. Scientists studying extreme adaptation often describe this kind of stripped-down design using a simple idea, sometimes summarized as use it or lose it. Traits that stop providing a clear benefit tend to fade away over generations, replaced by traits better suited to a changing environment. The hadal snailfish represents one of the most extreme examples of this principle in the entire animal kingdom. A body reshaped almost completely by the demands of crushing depth and total darkness. Yet even a perfectly streamlined body cannot survive on structure alone. Somewhere inside every cell, invisible even under a microscope at first glance, a chemical defense system had to be working constantly to keep this fish's proteins from falling apart, and that hidden battle is where the true secret of survival begins. Every living cell depends on tiny machines called proteins. These molecules fold into specific shapes to do their jobs, whether that is carrying oxygen through blood or helping muscles contract. Under extreme pressure, those folded shapes can start to bend and break apart, a process scientists call denaturation. Once a protein loses its shape, it usually stops working entirely. This is one of the biggest hidden threats facing any creature living 6 miles underwater. Pressure this intense does not just squeeze bones and skin. It reaches down to the molecular level, threatening to unravel the very proteins that keep cells alive. A fish could have the perfect flexible skeleton and still die if its internal chemistry collapsed under pressure. The hadal snailfish avoids this fate using a chemical compound called trimethylamine N-oxide, usually shortened to TMAO. Think of TMAO as a bodyguard for proteins, a molecule that surrounds delicate structures and helps hold their shape steady, even when outside forces try to bend them out of place. The deeper a fish lives, the more TMAO its body tends to produce, almost like turning up a dial as the danger increases. Scientists have measured TMAO levels across fish living at different ocean depths, and the pattern is striking. Shallow water fish carry very little of this compound. Fish living a mile down carry more. By the time you reach the hadal snailfish, living close to 6 miles under the surface, TMAO levels are dramatically higher than in almost any other fish species tested. Picture a tent staked down against strong wind. Without stakes, the tent collapses the moment the wind picks up. With enough stakes properly placed, the same tent can withstand a serious storm without folding. TMAO acts like those stakes, holding protein structures in place against a constant crushing force that would otherwise cause them to collapse. There is a limit to this trick, though. and that limit fascinates scientists studying pressure adaptation. Calculations suggest that if ocean trenches existed even deeper than they currently do, fish would need so much TMAO to survive that the chemical itself would start causing problems, disrupting the delicate balance of fluids inside their cells. Some researchers believe this may explain why no fish have ever been found living below roughly 8,000 meters, even though deeper trenches do exist. The ocean's deepest points might simply be beyond the reach of this particular survival trick. This detail turns the Adal snailfish into more than just an interesting animal. It becomes a living data point in a much bigger scientific question: how deep can life actually go before biology itself reaches a hard limit? The fish is not just surviving extreme pressure. It might be living almost exactly at the edge of where this kind of chemical protection stops working altogether. Understanding TMAO also opens the door to bigger applications beyond deep-sea biology. If a natural compound can protect proteins from collapsing under extreme stress, researchers wonder whether similar chemistry could someday help stabilize proteins in medicine or even in long-term food preservation. But before exploring where this science might lead, there is still more to understand about how TMAO actually works at the molecular level and why it succeeds where nothing else could. Understanding exactly how TMAO protects proteins requires picturing what a protein actually looks like. A protein starts as a long chain of building blocks, similar to a strand of beads. On its own, that chain does nothing useful. To function, it must fold into a specific three-dimensional shape, almost like origami, with each fold determining what job the protein can perform. Pressure threatens this folding process directly. High pressure pushes water molecules into tighter spaces around a protein, disrupting the folded structure and forcing it to stretch out or come apart. Once unfolded, a protein usually cannot refold correctly on its own, and a cell filled with broken, unfolded proteins quickly stops functioning. TMAO interferes with this collapse in a clever way. The molecule surrounds proteins and interacts with the surrounding water, essentially making it harder for water molecules to interfere with the protein's folded shape. Scientists describe this using a concept called counteraction, since TMAO does not stop pressure from pushing on cells. Instead, it counters the specific damage pressure tries to cause, keeping proteins stable even while everything around them is being squeezed. A useful way to picture this is comparing it to bracing a tall bookshelf during an earthquake. You cannot stop the ground from shaking, but adding strong support beams can stop the shelves from toppling over, even while the shaking continues around them. TMAO acts as that support system for proteins, allowing them to keep their essential shape steady, even as pressure keeps pushing from every direction. This chemical trick is not unique to the Hadal snailfish. Scientists have found TMAO in many deep-sea creatures, from fish to squid to crustaceans, though usually in smaller amounts than what researchers measured in this particular species. The Hadal snailfish appears to rely on some of the highest known concentrations of TMAO ever recorded in a vertebrate animal, matching its position as one of the deepest living fish species on the planet. There is something almost poetic about this discovery. A creature living in one of the most violent, crushing environments on Earth survives not through brute strength, but through subtle chemistry, a molecule quietly working behind the scenes to hold everything together at a scale too small to see. While its soft bones and flexible skull handle the physical side of pressure, TMAO handles the invisible side, protecting the very building blocks of life itself. This discovery has caught the attention of scientists well beyond marine biology. Understanding how TMAO stabilizes proteins under extreme pressure could eventually help researchers studying diseases linked to protein misfolding, conditions where proteins in the human body lose their proper shape and stop functioning correctly. Nature may have already solved a problem researchers have been chasing in laboratories for years, hidden inside a fish most people have never heard of, living in a place almost nobody will ever see with their own eyes. But surviving pressure, even with this level of protection, still leaves one enormous challenge unanswered. Being able to survive is not the same as being able to thrive, and for the Hadal snailfish to actually live a full life this deep, it needed a way to survive something even more dangerous than pressure itself, exposure to a world humans could never enter and walk away from. It is worth pausing to imagine what would actually happen to a human body dropped unprotected to the same depth where the Hadal snailfish lives. This is not a slow, gradual danger. It is closer to instant and total. At 6 miles down, the pressure pressing in from every direction would be roughly 8 tons per square inch. Human lungs, filled with air, would collapse almost immediately, since air compresses far more than water does. Air pockets inside the ears, sinuses and chest cavity would crush inward violently, faster than the nervous system could even register pain. Engineers who build submersibles for Hadal research spend years designing hulls specifically to prevent this exact kind of catastrophic failure, using thick titanium spheres precisely shaped to distribute pressure evenly. This is why humans can only reach these depths inside heavily engineered vehicles, and even then, only briefly, with extreme caution. A single flaw in a submersible's design at this depth would not cause a slow leak. It would cause instant, total destruction. Understanding this helps explain just how remarkable it is that a soft-bodied fish, without any mechanical protection at all, survives here comfortably every single day of its life. The Hadal snailfish does not fight this pressure the way engineers design submersibles to fight it. Its entire body works with the pressure instead. No trapped air pockets, since it has no swim bladder. No rigid skeleton to crack under stress, since its bones stay soft and flexible. No proteins collapsing under strain, thanks to high concentrations of TMAO protecting its cellular chemistry. Every adaptation discovered so far connects into one unified strategy: survive by bending, not by resisting. This comparison between human vulnerability and fish survival highlights something important about evolution. Humans evolved in a world of air, sunlight, and moderate pressure. Every part of our biology, from our lungs to our bones, reflects that specific environment. We are perfectly suited to life on land and completely unsuited to life in the crushing deep sea. The Hadal snailfish evolved under entirely different pressures, quite literally, and its body reflects a completely different set of survival priorities. This is part of why studying extreme creatures like the Hadal snailfish matters so much to scientists. It is not just about understanding one strange fish. It is about understanding the outer edges of what biology can accomplish and what happens to living systems when conditions become as extreme as physically possible on this planet. Every discovery about this fish's pressure tolerance adds to a growing scientific picture of how flexible, adaptable, and surprising life can actually be. Yet surviving the pressure is only half the challenge of living in the Hadal zone. Even a perfectly adapted body still needs to eat, and finding food in a place with no sunlight, no plants, and almost no visible prey presents an entirely different kind of survival puzzle. One the Hadal snailfish had to solve using senses built for a world without light. Scientists examining Hadal snailfish specimens noticed something unusual about their stomachs. Rather than a small, tightly controlled organ, many specimens showed stomachs that appeared stretched, sometimes dramatically inflated compared to the rest of their slender bodies. At first this looked strange, almost like a defect. Closer study revealed something far more interesting about how this fish actually survives. Food is scarce 6 miles beneath the ocean surface. Almost nothing grows down here, since sunlight cannot reach these depths, and without sunlight, plants and algae cannot exist. Nearly everything an animal in the Hadal zone eats either drifts down from far above as decaying material or comes from other creatures already living in the trench. Meals are rare, unpredictable, and often small. An inflated stomach solves a specific problem tied to this scarcity. Rather than eating small amounts frequently, the way many surface fish do, the Hadal snailfish appears built to eat large amounts whenever food becomes available, stretching its stomach to store as much as possible in a single opportunity. This strategy makes sense in an environment where the next meal might not come for a long time. Picture the difference between grabbing a quick snack every couple of hours versus preparing for a famine by eating an enormous meal whenever food finally appears, then going a long stretch without eating again. The second strategy sounds unusual for most animals, but in a place with unpredictable food supply, it becomes a smart, efficient way to survive. Stomach content studies support this idea. Researchers examining what Hadal snailfish had eaten before being captured found stomachs often packed with prey, sometimes far more than expected for an animal of its size. Rather than nibbling constantly, This fish seems to gorge itself whenever the opportunity arises, then rely on that stored energy to survive through leaner periods. This feeding strategy connects to a bigger truth about life in extreme environments. Survival is not only about withstanding physical danger like crushing pressure, it also depends on solving practical, everyday problems like finding enough energy to stay alive. A perfectly pressure-resistant body means nothing if the animal cannot secure enough food to power that body in the first place. The Hadal snailfish's stretchy stomach reflects an entire lifestyle built around uncertainty. It cannot predict when its next meal will arrive, so its body evolved to make the absolute most of every opportunity when food does appear. This same principle shows up in other extreme environments across the animal kingdom, from desert animals storing fat for lean seasons to deep-sea sharks capable of surviving for weeks without eating. Yet finding food in complete darkness raises its own separate mystery. If this fish cannot rely on sight in any meaningful way, how does it locate prey at all in an environment with zero natural light? The answer involves a set of finely tuned senses built specifically to detect movement, vibration, and chemical signals in water. Senses that essentially allow the Hadal snailfish to see the world without ever truly seeing it. Close your eyes and try walking across a familiar room. Most people can manage it slowly, relying on memory and touch. Now imagine doing that same task for your entire life, in a place you have never memorized, hunting for food you cannot see, in water so dark that even the concept of light barely applies. This is daily life for the Hadal snailfish. Vision becomes almost useless at 6 miles down. Sunlight cannot penetrate anywhere close to this depth, and there are no glowing predators or prey nearby bright enough to matter. Yet the Hadal snailfish still manages to locate food consistently, which means it must rely on senses that do not depend on light at all. One key tool is a sensory system found in many fish called the lateral line. This is a row of tiny sensors running along the sides of the body, capable of detecting even the faintest vibrations and changes in water pressure nearby. Think of it like an invisible set of fingertips stretched across the fish's entire body, constantly feeling the water for those tiny disturbances. A shrimp-like creature stirring sediment a few inches away creates ripples too small for a human to notice, but easily detectable through a well-developed lateral line system. Smell likely plays an important role as well. Water carries chemical signals from decaying material or nearby prey, and many deep-sea animals have highly sensitive smell receptors specifically adapted to detect faint traces of these chemicals from a distance. In a place where meals are rare and hard to find, being able to smell food from farther away offers a huge survival advantage. Combining these senses allows the Hadal snailfish to build an accurate picture of its surroundings without needing light at all. It can sense movement nearby, detect chemical trails leading toward food, and respond quickly once it locates a target, all without relying on the one sense most animals depend on most heavily near the surface. This hunting strategy connects back to earlier discoveries about the fish's body. Its inflated stomach makes sense once you understand how unpredictable and effortful finding food actually is down here. Locating prey using vibration and smell alone takes patience and energy. So when the Hadal snailfish finally succeeds, eating as much as possible becomes the smartest possible choice. There is something remarkable about an animal that has essentially rebuilt its entire relationship with the world around a single missing sense. Where humans and most surface animals depend heavily on sight to navigate daily life, the Hadal snailfish thrives using an entirely different sensory map, one built for darkness rather than light. This raises an interesting question though. If sight matters so little in this environment, why do Hadal snailfish still have eyes at all? Some deep-sea creatures lose their eyes completely over generations, since maintaining unused organs costs energy for no benefit. Yet genetic studies of the Hadal snailfish reveal something surprising buried inside its DNA, a set of clues suggesting this fish's relationship with light and vision might be more complicated than it first appears. The Hadal zone might look empty at first glance, but zoom in close enough and the seafloor tells a different story. Scattered across the mud and sediment, tiny shrimp-like creatures called amphipods gather in surprising numbers, forming one of the most important food sources for anything large enough to eat them in this extreme environment. Amphipods are small crustaceans, distant relatives of shrimp and crabs, though most measure just a couple of inches long. In the Hadal zone, One particular species has adapted so successfully to crushing depths that it thrives in numbers few scientists expected to find this deep. Baited traps lowered into ocean trenches sometimes come back swarming with hundreds of these creatures, drawn in by the scent of food from miles around. For the Hadal snailfish, amphipods represent a reliable, abundant meal source in an otherwise unpredictable environment. Stomach content studies confirm that amphipods make up a major part of this fish's diet, alongside other small invertebrates living along the seafloor. In a place where larger prey is scarce, amphipods fill a critical role, small enough to catch easily, but plentiful enough to provide consistent nutrition. These tiny crustaceans have their own remarkable survival story. Just like the Hadal snailfish, amphipods living at extreme depths have developed unique adaptations to handle crushing pressure, including specialized proteins and chemical compounds that protect their bodies in ways similar to what protects the fish that hunts them. Some species even carry unusually thick mineral-reinforced shells, an adaptation scientists believe may help offset the corrosive effects of deep ocean water on calcium-based structures. This relationship between predator and prey highlights something important about life in the Hadal zone. Survival here is not a story about one lonely, isolated species defying the odds. It is a story about an entire interconnected ecosystem, layered with predators, prey, and countless smaller organisms, all working together, all adapted in their own specific ways to handle the same crushing conditions. Food chains like this one depend on energy, ultimately arriving from somewhere. Since sunlight cannot reach this deep, amphipods and other small creatures often feed on organic material drifting down from the ocean above. A slow, constant rain of decaying matter that sinks from the surface over days or weeks. This process, sometimes called marine snow, acts as the foundation feeding much of the deep ocean's food web. Amphipods gather and process this material, growing in large numbers across the trench floor. The Hadal snailfish, in turn, relies on amphipods as a steady, dependable meal, closing a food chain that stretches from sunlight far above, down through miles of open ocean, and finally into one of the darkest, most extreme habitats on the entire planet. This connection between distant surface ecosystems and life in the deepest trenches reveals something profound. Even in a place this isolated, this hostile, and this far removed from sunlight, life still finds a way to connect back to the rest of the planet's food web. But amphipods are not the only surprising residents of this trench, and understanding how the Hadal snailfish actually hunts and processes prey required scientists to dig even deeper into its genetic code, uncovering secrets about senses this fish was never expected to still possess. Genetics can reveal secrets that physical observation alone never could. When scientists finally sequenced the complete genome of the Hadal snailfish, becoming the first time researchers had ever mapped the full genetic code of an animal living this deep, they expected to confirm what seemed obvious. In a lightless world, eyesight should be a useless, fading trait. At first, the results matched that expectation. Several genes normally responsible for detecting light had mutations that stopped them from working properly, matching a pattern seen in many other deep-sea and cave-dwelling animals that gradually lose functional eyesight over generations. This made sense. Why would evolution continue investing energy into a sense with nothing useful to detect? Then researchers found something unexpected buried deeper in the genetic code. Not every light detection gene had shut down. A small handful remained active, still capable of producing functional proteins involved in sensing light. This discovery immediately raised a fascinating question. If this fish lives in complete darkness, why would any part of its light-sensing system still be switched on? Scientists have proposed a few possible explanations, though the full answer remains an open scientific mystery. One idea suggests that extremely faint traces of light might exist even at these depths, perhaps from bioluminescent creatures nearby, flashing brief signals in an otherwise pitch-black world. Even the smallest flicker of light in an environment this dark could provide useful information, whether that means noticing a nearby predator or spotting a potential meal. Another possibility involves evolutionary timing. Genetic changes like losing eyesight often happen gradually, across enormous stretches of time. It is possible the Hadal snailfish's ancestors have not lived at extreme depths for quite long enough, evolutionarily speaking, for every light-related gene to fully shut down. In this view, the fish could be caught mid-transition, still carrying leftover genetic material from a not-too-distant ancestor that once relied on eyesight in shallower, brighter water. Either explanation reveals something important about evolution itself. Genetic change rarely happens instantly, and traits do not disappear the moment they stop being useful. Instead, evolution often leaves behind partial clues, fragments of old adaptations mixed alongside new ones, creating a genetic record that scientists can study to reconstruct an animal's evolutionary journey. This discovery transformed how researchers think about the Hadal snailfish. It is not simply a blind fish adapted for darkness. It is a species caught in an active, ongoing evolutionary process, one that might still be changing, adapting, and adjusting to its environment even today. Studying its genome offers a rare, real-time glimpse into evolution happening in one of the most extreme environments Earth has to offer. This raises a bold possibility scientists are still exploring. Could this fish sense faint traces of light in ways not yet fully understood? The idea that a creature living in what seems like total darkness might still hold on to some connection to light challenges everything researchers thought they knew about life at these crushing, lightless depths, and that mystery pushes directly into the next stage of the story, the question of whether this blind hunter is really as blind as it first appears. Continuing straight through chapters 18 to 33, maintaining the escalating intensity toward the finale. Chapter 18, A Blind Hunter That Might Still Sense. Faint light in the abyss. Total darkness sounds absolute, like flipping off a light switch in a windowless room. The Hadal zone comes close to that description, but close is not the same as complete. Scientists studying this trench have discovered something that complicates the simple idea of a lightless world, and it directly connects to the mystery buried inside the Hadal snailfish's genetic code. Some deep-sea creatures produce their own light through a process called bioluminescence, using chemical reactions inside their bodies to create brief flashes or steady glows. This ability shows up throughout the ocean, from glowing jellyfish near the surface to strange anglerfish dangling lit lures in the middle depths. Even in the Hadal zone, some organisms are believed to produce faint bioluminescent flashes, though this remains an area scientists are still actively researching. If even a small amount of light exists down here, however brief or rare, an animal capable of detecting it could gain a real advantage. A flash might signal a nearby predator to avoid, or reveal the location of potential prey moving through the water. In an environment already stripped of most sensory information, even a faint occasional signal could matter enormously. This idea connects directly back to the leftover light-sensing genes discovered in the Hadal snailfish's genome. Rather than viewing these genes as random leftovers doing nothing useful, some scientists suspect they might still provide a limited basic ability to detect sudden flashes of light, even if the fish cannot see detailed shapes or colours the way surface animals do. This would not be true eyesight in the traditional sense, but a stripped-down, minimal system built to notice one specific thing: light appearing where there should be none. Testing this idea directly proves extremely difficult. Studying live behaviour at these depths requires specialised equipment capable of surviving crushing pressure, and observing a fish's reaction to controlled light flashes 6 miles underwater remains a significant technical challenge. For now, this remains a compelling hypothesis, rather than a confirmed fact, one of many open questions still surrounding this species. What makes this mystery so compelling is how it reframes the entire story of the Hadal snailfish. This is not simply a fish that gave up on vision entirely, adapting to darkness by abandoning sight altogether. It might instead be a creature walking a careful middle path, holding on to just enough light sensitivity to catch anything useful, while relying primarily on other senses like touch and smell for its daily survival. This blending of senses reflects a broader truth about evolution in extreme environments. Nature rarely deals in absolutes. Very few adaptations are complete strengths or complete weaknesses. Instead, most successful species develop layered, overlapping systems, combining multiple partial senses into one workable strategy for survival. The Hadal snailfish may represent exactly this kind of layered solution, a hunter relying mainly on vibration and smell, but potentially backed up by a faint residual awareness of light whenever the rare flash appears in its world. This combination of senses helped this fish carve out a life in one of Earth's harshest environments. But surviving here is not just about finding food or sensing danger. It also means understanding why almost nothing else on Earth has managed to do what this fish does, and that question leads straight into one of the biggest debates in modern deep-sea biology. Chapter 19. Why scientists say this. Fish shouldn't exist by normal biology rules. Every field of science operates on rules, patterns discovered through decades of research that help predict what should and should not be possible. For a long time, deep-sea biology followed a fairly clear rule regarding vertebrate animals, creatures with backbones like fish, reptiles and mammals. Below a certain depth, the rule stated, the pressure simply becomes too extreme for a vertebrate's biology to function. This idea was not just guesswork. It was based on real physical calculations involving how pressure affects proteins, cell membranes, and biological processes at a molecular level. Researchers studying pressure tolerance in fish proposed a theoretical depth limit, a point beyond which no fish, no matter how well adapted, should be able to survive, based on how much protective chemistry, like TMAO, a body could realistically produce before that chemistry itself became harmful. For years, this theoretical limit matched observed reality fairly well. Fish became rarer and rarer the deeper researchers searched, and no vertebrate had ever been documented living much beyond a certain depth. Then the Hadal snailfish appeared, thriving at depths that pushed right up against, and in some cases seemed to challenge, the very limit scientists had calculated. This created genuine excitement and debate within the scientific community. Some researchers pointed out that the Hadal snailfish's depth range sits remarkably close to the predicted theoretical limit, suggesting the original calculations were largely correct, and that this fish represents life pushed right up to the true edge of what is biologically possible. Others argued the discovery proves existing models need refinement, since a living animal actually surviving this deep suggests biology might have more flexibility than laboratory calculations alone could predict. This kind of disagreement is not a failure of science. It represents exactly how scientific understanding grows. A theory makes a prediction, new evidence arrives that tests that prediction, and researchers adjust their thinking based on what the real world actually shows them. The Hadal snailfish became a living test case for ideas that had previously existed only on paper and in laboratory calculations. What makes this fish so scientifically valuable is that it exists precisely at this boundary. It is not thriving comfortably in the middle of a safe range. It appears to be living close to, or possibly at, the actual outer edge of where vertebrate life can survive at all in the ocean. This positions the Hadal snailfish as one of the most important living data points scientists have ever found for understanding the true limits of biology under extreme pressure. There is something almost thrilling about a creature that exists exactly where theory says life should barely be possible, thriving instead of merely surviving. It suggests nature often operates closer to its true limits than scientists initially assume, finding clever, unexpected solutions precisely where conditions seem most hostile. This raises an important question about how this discovery actually happened. Reaching a fish living this deep required more than curiosity. It required building technology capable of surviving conditions that challenge even the best modern engineering, and the story of how scientists actually found and filmed this creature is itself a remarkable tale of persistence, innovation, and a submersible built specifically to chase this exact mystery into the deepest place on the planet. Chapter 20. The Discovery Story. A Chinese submersible named Fenduje. Descends behind every scientific discovery sits a team of people willing to take enormous risks in pursuit of an answer. The story of how researchers finally observed the Hadal snailfish thriving in its natural habitat centers on a submersible named Fenduje, a name meaning striver, built specifically to reach the most extreme depths of the ocean. Fenduje represents one of the most advanced pieces of deep-sea technology ever constructed, engineered to carry a small crew of scientists directly to the bottom of the Mariana Trench and safely back again. Unlike earlier unmanned devices that could only send back limited data, Fenduje allowed actual researchers to descend into the Hadal zone, observing conditions firsthand rather than relying entirely on remote instruments. The vehicle's design reflects just how seriously engineers had to take the challenge of Hadal depths. Its crew cabin consists of an extremely thick titanium sphere, precisely shaped to distribute crushing pressure evenly across its entire surface. Even a small imperfection in this shape could create a weak point capable of catastrophic failure under the immense forces found 6 miles beneath the surface. During a series of dives, researchers aboard Fendouje descended through mile after mile of increasingly dark water. Sunlight disappears entirely within the first few hundred feet. By a mile down, the water surrounding the submersible exists in complete permanent blackness, broken only by the vehicle's own exterior lights and occasional flashes of bioluminescent life drifting past the windows. Reaching the ocean floor at these depths takes hours, not minutes. Crew members describe long stretches of quiet anticipation, watching pressure gauges climb steadily as the vehicle sinks deeper than almost any human has ever travelled. When Fendouje finally touched down near the bottom of the trench, its lights illuminated a landscape few people on Earth had ever seen with their own eyes. It was during dives like these that researchers first observed Hadal snailfish behaving naturally in their environment, rather than studying dead specimens pulled up in traps. Watching the fish swim, hunt, and interact with its surroundings directly provided information no trap or remote camera could fully capture. Scientists could observe real-time behavior, movement patterns, and even interactions between different species sharing the same extreme habitat. This kind of direct observation matters enormously in science. Specimens collected in traps can suffer damage during the difficult journey back to the surface, sometimes losing colour, shape, or other details due to the sudden change in pressure. Watching a living animal in its natural environment, calm and undisturbed, offers a far more accurate picture of how that creature actually survives and behaves day to day. The success of missions like these also reflects a broader shift in ocean science. For decades, the deep sea remained one of the least explored regions on the entire planet, harder to reach in some ways than outer space. Advances in submersible engineering, powerful lighting systems, and durable camera technology have finally begun opening this hidden world to direct human observation, revealing an ecosystem far richer and stranger than anyone previously imagined. Descending into the trench was only the first challenge, though. Once researchers reached the bottom, they still needed specialized equipment capable of capturing clear footage in complete darkness, under pressure extreme enough to destroy ordinary cameras within seconds, and building that technology required its own remarkable feats of engineering. Chapter 21: Cameras Built to Survive. Crushing Pressure. Finally catch the fish on video. Filming a fish in near total darkness 6 miles beneath the ocean surface requires solving problems most photographers never have to consider. Standard cameras, even expensive professional equipment, would be destroyed almost instantly by pressure this extreme. Capturing usable footage of the Hadal snailfish demanded entirely specialized technology, built from the ground up to survive one of the harshest environments imaginable. Engineers designing deep-sea cameras face a core challenge similar to the one facing the Hadal snailfish itself, finding a way to avoid trapped air pockets that pressure could crush. Camera housings for Hadal research are built using thick, precisely shaped materials, often titanium or specially reinforced glass, designed to distribute pressure evenly rather than allowing dangerous weak points to form. Lighting presents an equally difficult problem. Since sunlight never reaches these depths, any footage requires powerful artificial light sources strong enough to illuminate the pitch-black water, without disturbing or frightening away the very creatures scientists hope to observe. Researchers carefully calibrate lighting systems, often using dimmer, longer-lasting illumination rather than sudden bright flashes that might startle sensitive deep-sea animals accustomed to permanent darkness. Many successful observations of the Hadal snailfish came from specialized deep-sea landers, autonomous devices lowered directly to the seafloor and left in place for extended periods. These landers combine bait, lighting, and camera systems into a single unit, allowing researchers to record hours of footage without needing a crewed submersible present the entire time. Once deployed, a lander might sit on the trench floor for many hours, patiently waiting and recording as curious creatures approach the bait. This patient approach paid off. Footage captured this way revealed behavior scientists had never documented before. Fish swimming naturally, exploring bait, and interacting with their environment in ways that felt remarkably ordinary, almost casual, despite existing in one of the most extreme places on the planet. Watching a Hadal snailfish glide calmly through frame, completely unfazed by conditions that would instantly destroy most technology built by humans, left a strong impression on researchers reviewing the footage. Beyond simply confirming the fish's existence, this footage provided crucial scientific data. Researchers could study exact swimming patterns, feeding behavior, and even interactions between multiple individuals sharing the same space. This kind of detailed behavioral information proved impossible to gather from dead specimens alone, no matter how carefully those specimens were examined in a laboratory setting. The successful development of Hadal-capable cameras also opened the door to future discoveries beyond just the Hadal snailfish. With reliable imaging technology finally capable of surviving these extreme depths, researchers gained a powerful new tool for exploring other unstudied regions of the deepest ocean trenches, regions that remain almost entirely unmapped even today. This technological achievement represents years of engineering effort focused on a single goal, allowing human curiosity to finally reach places human bodies could never survive directly. Every successful video of the Hadal snailfish represents not just a biological discovery, but an engineering triumph, proof that persistent innovation can eventually overcome even the most extreme physical barriers our planet has to offer. Understanding exactly how extreme this environment truly is requires stepping back and comparing it to something more familiar, something almost everyone has heard of, a comparison that puts the sheer scale of this trench into a perspective few people ever consider. Chapter 22. Comparing the trench to Mount Everest. Turned upside down and underwater numbers, describing ocean depth rarely mean much without a comparison people already understand. Saying a trench reaches nearly 7 miles down sounds impressive but abstract. Comparing that same trench to something as famous as Mount Everest turns an abstract number into something almost anyone can picture clearly. Mount Everest, the tallest mountain on Earth, rises just over 5.5 miles above sea level. Now imagine flipping that entire mountain upside down and dropping it into the deepest part of the ocean, the Mariana Trench. Even after sinking the full height of Everest into this trench, more than a mile of open water would still remain above the mountain's peak before reaching the ocean's surface. This comparison helps explain why the Hadal Zone remains one of the least explored regions on the entire planet. Climbing Mount Everest, while extremely dangerous, has been accomplished by thousands of people using specialized equipment and careful preparation. Reaching the bottom of the Mariana Trench has been accomplished by only a small handful of people in all of human history, fewer than the number of astronauts who have walked on the moon. This scale difference comes down to the extreme conditions found at crushing ocean depths versus high mountain altitudes. Climbers face thin air and freezing temperatures near Everest's summit, serious challenges but survivable ones with the right equipment. The deepest ocean trenches present an entirely different category of danger. Pressure so extreme that ordinary submarines cannot survive the journey, requiring highly specialized vehicles built specifically for this single purpose. The Hadal snailfish lives its entire life within this staggering scale, in a trench deep enough to completely swallow the tallest mountain on Earth and still leave room to spare. This fact makes its survival even more remarkable. This is not a creature adapted to a moderately deep or challenging environment. It thrives in conditions representing one of the most extreme physical environments found anywhere on the surface of our planet. Understanding this scale also helps explain why scientists remain so fascinated by the Hadal Zone, despite decades of exploration elsewhere in the ocean. Shallow reefs and coastal waters have been studied extensively for generations, mapped, catalogued and explored by countless researchers and recreational divers alike. The Hadal Zone, by comparison, remains almost entirely mysterious, hidden behind a barrier of pressure that has only recently become possible to overcome with modern technology. Every new expedition into a trench this size has the potential to uncover species and behaviours never previously documented. The Hadal snailfish itself remained completely unknown to science until relatively recently. Discovered only once, researchers finally developed the tools needed to safely explore depths this extreme. This scale comparison sets the stage for understanding exactly how deep the Hadal snailfish's specific depth record actually reaches, and why that particular number matters so much to scientists studying the outer limits of where vertebrate life can survive on this planet. Chapter 23. The record depth. nearly 6 miles deeper than any fish known. Records exist to mark the outer edge of what is currently known to be possible, and few records in the natural world feel as extreme as the depth record held by the Hadal snailfish. Confirmed sightings and footage place this species living and thriving at depths beyond 26,000 feet, deeper than any other fish species ever documented on Earth. To put this number into context, most familiar ocean life exists in a relatively narrow band near the surface. Coral reefs, colourful fish, and the marine life featured in most nature documentaries typically live within the top few hundred feet of water, where sunlight still reaches and temperatures remain relatively mild. The Hadal snailfish lives roughly 50 times deeper than that entire familiar zone, in a completely different world governed by different physical rules. This depth record did not appear overnight. Scientists spent years gradually documenting fish living deeper and deeper into ocean trenches, slowly pushing back the boundary of what seemed biologically possible. Each new depth record represented not just a new data point, but a genuine test of existing scientific theories about pressure tolerance and biological limits. What makes the Hadal snailfish's record particularly significant is how close it sits to the theoretical limits scientists had already calculated, using laboratory research on protein stability and pressure tolerance. Rather than falling short of predictions or dramatically exceeding them, this fish appears to live almost exactly where calculations suggested vertebrate life should reach its absolute breaking point. This precise alignment between theory and observation offers scientists a rare and valuable opportunity. Instead of guessing at where biological limits might exist, researchers now have living proof, a functioning example of life operating right at the theoretical edge of what pressure tolerance allows. Studying this fish in detail offers a direct window into understanding exactly how close life can push toward true impossibility before finally breaking down completely. Beyond scientific significance, this record carries a certain emotional weight as well. It represents one of the clearest examples of life's persistence, an animal thriving in conditions that seem, by almost any reasonable measure, completely hostile to survival. Every adaptation discussed so far, from soft bones to protective chemistry to specialized senses, exists specifically because evolution refused to accept that depth alone should mean the absence of life. Holding a record like this also means the Hadal snailfish occupies a unique position in ongoing scientific research. Any future expedition documenting fish at even greater depths would represent a major scientific event, potentially reshaping current understanding of biological limits once again. For now, though, this fish stands alone as the deepest confirmed vertebrate on the entire planet, a title that highlights just how extraordinary its survival truly is. Understanding this record fully requires imagining the opposite scenario as well. What would actually happen if an ordinary, unadapted fish somehow found itself dragged down to these same crushing depths? A comparison that makes the Hadal snailfish's specialized survival abilities even more striking by contrast. Chapter 24. What happens to a normal fish dragged to this depth? Every adaptation discussed throughout this story becomes far more impressive once compared directly against what would happen to an ordinary fish suddenly exposed to Hadal conditions. Most fish species, even those adapted to moderate ocean depths, are simply not built to survive the pressure found 6 miles beneath the surface. The biggest immediate danger for a typical fish involves its swim bladder, the gas-filled organ most fish use to control buoyancy in the water. Unlike the Hadal snailfish, which lacks this organ entirely, most fish rely on it constantly. As pressure increases with depth, gas inside a swim bladder compresses. At extreme Hadal pressure, that compression becomes catastrophic, potentially rupturing internal organs or causing severe immediate damage. Even setting aside the swim bladder problem, an ordinary fish's rigid, hardened skeleton would face serious stress at these depths. Bones built for structural strength near the surface become dangerous liabilities under pressure this extreme, since rigid materials handle uneven, crushing force far worse than flexible ones. Fractures and structural failure would likely occur relatively quickly. Beyond physical structure, cellular chemistry presents an equally serious problem. Most fish species produce only small amounts of TMAO, the protective compound found in high concentrations throughout the Hadal snailfish's body. Without sufficient TMAO, proteins throughout an ordinary fish's cells, would begin losing their proper shape under extreme pressure, disrupting essential biological processes needed to keep the animal alive. Scientists studying pressure tolerance sometimes describe this using a useful comparison. Imagine asking someone who has only ever hiked at sea level to suddenly climb to the top of the tallest mountain on Earth without any acclimatization, oxygen support, or specialized equipment. Their body simply lacks the adaptations needed to function in that environment, no matter how healthy or strong they might be under normal conditions. An ordinary fish faces an even more extreme version of this same mismatch when placed under Hadal pressure. This comparison helps explain why so few species have successfully colonized the deepest ocean trenches. Surviving here does not simply require toughness or strength in a general sense. It requires highly specific, specialized adaptations targeting the exact physical challenges pressure creates at a molecular and structural level. General resilience is not enough. Only precise, targeted biological solutions work at this depth. This reality makes species like the Hadal snailfish even more remarkable by comparison. Evolution did not simply make this fish tougher in a vague general sense. It reshaped nearly every aspect of its biology, bones, skin, internal chemistry, and sensory systems, specifically targeting the unique challenges of Hadal depth survival. Understanding what an ordinary fish would face down here highlights just how specialized and successful the Hadal snailfish's adaptations truly are. But this fish does not live alone in this extreme environment. Sharing the same crushing depths are other remarkable creatures, equally specialized in their own ways, forming a complete ecosystem built entirely around surviving conditions that would instantly destroy almost anything else on the planet. Chapter 25. The Trench's Other Residents. Amphipods with armor-like shells. Deep-sea trenches often appear empty at first glance, vast stretches of dark, featureless mud extending in every direction. Closer investigation reveals a surprisingly active community of creatures sharing this extreme environment alongside the Hadal snailfish, each facing the same crushing conditions using their own specialized survival strategies. Among the most abundant residents are amphipods, the small shrimp-like creatures that serve as a primary food source for the Hadal snailfish. While previous discussion focused on their role as prey, these creatures deserve attention in their own right, since surviving at these depths required amphipods to develop remarkable adaptations of their own. Some Hadal amphipod species have developed unusually thick reinforced shells, an adaptation that initially puzzled researchers. Deep ocean water tends to be corrosive toward calcium-based structures, since extreme pressure and cold temperatures create chemical conditions that can gradually dissolve calcium carbonate, the mineral many shells and exoskeletons rely on for strength. This should make maintaining a strong shell particularly difficult at extreme depths. Researchers studying these amphipods discovered they compensate by incorporating unusual mineral combinations into their shells, creating structures resistant to the corrosive effects of deep ocean water. This represents a completely different survival strategy compared to the Hadal snailfish's approach. Rather than abandoning hard structures entirely the way the fish did with its skeleton, these amphipods reinforced their armor, finding a different biological solution to survive the same extreme environment. This contrast reveals something important about evolution and adaptation. There is rarely only one correct way to solve a survival challenge. Two different species living in the exact same extreme environment, facing identical pressure and chemical conditions, developed completely opposite strategies, one abandoning rigid structure entirely, the other reinforcing it. Both approaches succeeded, proving that evolution often finds multiple valid paths toward the same basic goal, staying alive long enough to reproduce. Beyond their physical armor, Hadal amphipods carry their own version of chemical protection, similar to the TMAO found in the Hadal snailfish, helping stabilize their internal proteins against the same crushing pressure, threatening every creature living at this depth. This shared chemical strategy suggests certain fundamental solutions to extreme pressure. Survival may repeat across very different types of animals, from fish to crustaceans, whenever life pushes into similarly hostile environments. The presence of thriving amphipod populations also helps explain how an entire food web can exist this deep, despite the complete absence of sunlight. These small, resilient creatures process organic material drifting down from far above, converting it into energy that eventually supports larger predators like the Hadal snailfish. Without amphipods filling this crucial role, the entire ecosystem at these depths would likely collapse. Understanding this broader ecosystem helps explain a deeper mystery about how any life survives here at all, given that traditional food sources like sunlight-powered plants simply do not exist at these depths. This leads directly to one of the strangest and most important discoveries in modern deep-sea biology, an entirely different way life learned to generate energy, using chemistry instead of sunlight as its primary power source. Chapter 26. Life running on chemicals, instead of sunlight, called chemosynthesis. Nearly every food chain on Earth's surface begins with the same basic source of energy, sunlight. Plants capture light and convert it into usable energy through photosynthesis, and every other organism further up the food chain, from insects to humans, ultimately depends on that sunlight-powered foundation. 6 miles beneath the ocean surface, sunlight cannot reach at all, which raises an obvious question. Where does the energy powering this entire hidden ecosystem actually come from? The answer involves a completely different biological process called chemosynthesis. Instead of using sunlight, certain specialized bacteria living in the Hadal zone extract energy directly from chemical reactions, often involving compounds like methane or hydrogen sulfide that seep up through cracks in the ocean floor. These chemicals, often toxic to most forms of life, become an essential energy source for bacteria specifically adapted to process them. This process works similarly to photosynthesis in one important way. Just as plants convert sunlight into usable chemical energy, chemosynthetic bacteria convert these seafloor chemicals into usable energy, effectively building an entire food chain from raw chemistry rather than raw sunlight. Larger organisms in the trench, including some amphipods, feed either directly on these bacteria or on other creatures that consume them, creating a food web running on an entirely different power source than almost everywhere else on the planet's surface. The discovery of chemosynthesis fundamentally changed how scientists understand the possibility of life in extreme environments, not just on Earth, but potentially elsewhere in the universe. Before this process was understood, many scientists assumed life absolutely required sunlight in some form to exist. Finding thriving ecosystems built entirely around chemical energy instead proved that assumption wrong, opening up an entirely new category of environments where life might be possible. This discovery carries significant implications beyond deep-sea trenches here on Earth. Other locations across our solar system, including certain moons orbiting Jupiter and Saturn, are believed to contain deep, sunless oceans hidden beneath thick layers of ice. If chemosynthesis allows complex ecosystems to thrive here on Earth without any sunlight at all, similar processes could theoretically support life in these distant alien oceans as well. While the Hadal snailfish itself does not directly perform chemosynthesis, it exists within an ecosystem deeply shaped by this process. The amphipods it hunts, and the broader food web supporting this entire trench community, trace their energy indirectly back to these chemical reactions occurring deep within the seafloor. Understanding chemosynthesis helps explain how an entire thriving ecosystem can exist in a place completely cut off from the sun. This connection between deep ocean chemistry and the possibility of alien life represents one of the most exciting frontiers in modern science. Every discovery about how life adapts to extreme conditions here on Earth potentially expands scientists' understanding of where else in the universe life might exist, hidden in places once assumed to be completely lifeless. But even in an environment this isolated, this far removed from the rest of the planet's surface, evidence continues emerging that human activity has somehow still managed to reach this remote corner of the world, a discovery that carries a much darker and more troubling implication. Chapter 27. Bacteria in the fish's body, possibly helping it survive. Impossible pressure beyond the chemical protection provided by TMAO. Scientists studying Hadal creatures have begun uncovering another surprising layer of survival strategy, one involving tiny organisms living directly inside the bodies of larger deep-sea animals. This area of research remains relatively new, but early findings suggest bacteria may play a far bigger role in extreme pressure survival than previously understood. Every animal, including humans, carries populations of bacteria living inside their digestive systems and other tissues, collectively known as a microbiome. These bacteria perform countless useful functions, from helping digest food to supporting immune system function. Scientists studying deep-sea creatures have begun investigating whether the specific bacteria living inside animals, like the Hadal snailfish, might provide additional protection against extreme pressure, beyond what the animal's own biology produces on its own. Early research into deep-sea amphipods offers an interesting clue. Scientists studying bacteria living within amphipod digestive systems identified specific bacterial species potentially involved in producing additional protective compounds, possibly supporting the same kind of protein-stabilizing chemistry provided by TMAO. This suggests a kind of biological partnership, where bacteria living inside a larger animal contribute directly to that animal's ability to survive extreme pressure, rather than simply existing as passive passengers. This idea fits into a much broader pattern scientists have observed across many different species throughout the natural world. Microbiomes often play a far larger role in an animal's overall health and survival than researchers once assumed, sometimes providing critical functions the host animal's own body cannot produce independently. In extreme environments like the Hadal zone, this kind of partnership between host and bacteria could provide a crucial extra layer of protection against overwhelming pressure. While direct research specifically targeting bacteria inside Hadal snailfish remains limited, scientists studying this species closely note similar biological principles likely apply. Given how many other creatures in this extreme environment appear to rely on bacterial partnerships for chemical protection, researchers consider it likely that similar relationships exist within the Hadal snailfish itself, though confirming this definitively requires further study. This possibility adds yet another layer of complexity to understanding how this fish survives such extreme conditions. Its own genetics produce soft, flexible bones and high concentrations of protective TMAO. Its senses rely on vibration and smell rather than sight, and potentially invisible bacterial partners living inside its body contribute additional protective chemistry, working alongside the fish's own biology rather than separately from it. Nature rarely relies on a single solution to solve a difficult survival problem. Instead, successful species often combine multiple overlapping strategies, creating redundant layers of protection that work together rather than depending entirely on any single adaptation. The Hadal snailfish appears to represent exactly this kind of layered survival strategy, built from genetics, chemistry, and possibly bacterial partnership, all working in combination. Understanding these hidden partnerships between host animals and bacteria opens up entirely new directions for future research, not just in deep-sea biology, but in understanding extreme survival more broadly. Yet even as scientists uncover these remarkable natural partnerships, a much different and more troubling discovery emerged from the same expeditions, evidence that human civilization has already left its mark on even the most remote, hostile place on the entire planet. Chapter 28. Man-made trash. Found at the same depth as this untouched creature. Amid the excitement of discovering thriving ecosystems in one of Earth's most extreme environments, researchers exploring Hadal trenches encountered something deeply unsettling. Alongside remarkable creatures like the Hadal snailfish, cameras and collection equipment also revealed clear evidence of human trash, sitting undisturbed at the very bottom of the ocean, nearly 7 miles beneath the surface. Plastic bags, discarded cans, and even larger household items have been documented resting on the seafloor in some of the deepest, most remote trenches on the planet. This discovery shocked many of the researchers involved, who had travelled to one of the least accessible places on Earth, expecting almost total isolation from human civilization, only to find clear proof that human waste had somehow beaten them there. Understanding how trash ends up this deep reveals an uncomfortable truth about ocean pollution. Plastic and other debris entering the ocean near the surface does not simply disappear. Ocean currents, sinking organic material, and the sheer scale of the world's oceans eventually carry significant amounts of waste into even the most remote trenches, settling permanently onto the seafloor in places almost no human being will ever physically visit. This discovery carries serious scientific and environmental weight. If human trash can reach the bottom of the Mariana Trench, one of the most isolated environments on the entire planet, it strongly suggests there is essentially no part of Earth's ocean left completely untouched by human activity. The Hadal snailfish, an animal that evolved across millions of years in near total isolation from the rest of the planet, now shares its home with plastic waste originating from human cities thousands of miles away. Scientists studying this pollution have also discovered something unexpected, offering a small note of hope within an otherwise troubling finding. Certain deep-sea bacteria appear capable of slowly breaking down some types of plastic and chemical waste, potentially offering a natural, if extremely slow, method of processing pollution that reaches these extreme depths. Researchers are actively studying these bacteria, hoping to better understand their potential for addressing plastic pollution more broadly, though this research remains in early stages. This discovery does not diminish the remarkable story of the Hadal snailfish and its incredible adaptations. Instead, it adds an important, sobering layer to that story. This fish survives crushing pressure, absolute darkness, and near-total food scarcity, all while sharing its extreme habitat with evidence of human carelessness that had no business reaching this deep in the first place. The presence of trash at these depths also raises difficult questions about long-term environmental impact. Scientists do not yet fully understand how chemicals leaching from deep-sea plastic waste might affect delicate Hadal ecosystems over time, including creatures like the Hadal snailfish that have adapted so precisely to their specific environment across millions of years of evolution. This uncomfortable discovery highlights a bigger truth worth carrying forward. Even in a place as remote and inaccessible as the deepest ocean trench on the planet, human actions still leave a lasting mark, and understanding just how far that impact reaches matters enormously for protecting these fragile, barely understood ecosystems moving forward into the future. Chapter 29. What that discovery says about how far human impact reaches. Finding trash at the bottom of the deepest ocean trench on the planet forces a difficult reconsideration of what remote actually means. For most of human history, the deep ocean represented one of the last truly untouched frontiers on Earth, a place so distant and inaccessible that human activity seemed impossible to reach it in any meaningful way. This discovery proves that assumption wrong. Scientists studying ocean pollution have tracked how debris travels from coastal areas, cities, and shipping routes into the open ocean, eventually settling into deep trenches through a combination of ocean currents, sinking organic matter, and simple gravity pulling heavier objects downward over time. This process can take years, sometimes decades, but the end result remains the same. Waste generated on land eventually finds its way into even the most remote corners of the planet's oceans. This reality connects directly back to the ecosystem supporting creatures like the Hadal snailfish. Earlier discussion explained how organic material drifting down from the surface, sometimes called marine snow, provides essential nutrients supporting life throughout the Hadal zone. Unfortunately, this same pathway carrying beneficial nutrients downward also carries harmful pollution, arriving through an identical process that took millions of years to establish as a natural, healthy system. Researchers studying this problem emphasize an important distinction. Finding trash at extreme ocean depths does not mean these ecosystems are doomed or already destroyed. The Hadal snailfish and its neighbouring species continue thriving despite this pollution, at least based on current observations. However, scientists remain genuinely concerned about long-term effects that might not become obvious for years or even decades, particularly regarding how chemicals released from degrading plastic waste might slowly affect delicate biological processes these creatures depend on for survival. This concern connects to a broader pattern scientists have observed across many different ecosystems worldwide. Environmental damage often takes considerable time to become fully visible, sometimes appearing gradually across multiple generations of affected species, rather than causing immediate obvious harm. This makes deep-sea pollution particularly difficult to study and address, since researchers cannot easily observe subtle, long-term effects occurring miles beneath the ocean surface, hidden from direct human observation. Despite these challenges, this discovery has already influenced how scientists and policymakers think about ocean conservation more broadly. Finding clear evidence of human impact in the most remote possible location strengthens the argument that ocean pollution represents a truly global problem, one that cannot be solved through purely local or regional efforts alone. Waste generated anywhere on the planet potentially has the ability to reach anywhere else in the ocean, given enough time. This connects directly back to the Hadal snailfish's remarkable survival story in an unexpected way. This fish represents one of evolution's most extreme achievements, a creature perfectly adapted across millions of years to survive one of the harshest environments on the planet. Yet even this extraordinary adaptation cannot fully protect it from a threat that did not exist for nearly all of its evolutionary history: pollution originating from a species that only recently began significantly affecting the entire planet's ecosystems. Understanding this connection between human activity and even the most remote corners of the ocean adds important context to everything discovered so far about this remarkable fish. But the story of scientific discovery in the Hadal zone does not end with observing existing pollution. Researchers have also begun a much deeper investigation into the Hadal snailfish itself, using cutting-edge genetic technology to unlock secrets buried inside its DNA for the very first time in scientific history. Chapter 30. Scientists sequencing its DNA for the first time in history. Every living creature carries a complete genetic instruction manual inside nearly every cell of its body, a code that determines everything from physical appearance to internal chemistry. For decades, scientists have been racing to read this genetic code across countless species, building an enormous library of biological information. The Hadal snailfish holds a particularly significant place in this ongoing effort, becoming the first animal from the extreme Hadal zone to have its complete genome successfully sequenced. This achievement required overcoming serious practical challenges before scientific analysis could even begin. Collecting usable genetic samples from an animal living 6 miles underwater meant researchers first had to successfully retrieve specimens intact, without significant damage from the difficult journey to the surface. Sudden pressure changes during collection can damage delicate tissue, sometimes making genetic analysis difficult or impossible if samples arrive too degraded. Once researchers successfully obtained viable samples, the actual sequencing process began, mapping out the complete genetic code contained within the Hadal snailfish's DNA. This process involves incredibly detailed analysis, identifying specific genes, mutations, and genetic patterns that differ from related species living in shallower, less extreme environments. Every difference discovered offers potential clues about how this fish evolved its remarkable survival adaptations. The results confirmed many discoveries already suspected through physical observation, while also revealing entirely new information invisible through simple examination alone. Genetic analysis confirmed the specific mutation responsible for the fish's incomplete bone hardening, providing scientific proof behind what researchers had already observed through physical study of its unusually soft skeleton. It also revealed the genetic basis behind its unusual light-sensing genes, some active, some switched off, offering deeper insight into the evolutionary history driving this unusual pattern. Beyond confirming known adaptations, genetic sequencing revealed changes in numerous other genes related to cell membrane structure, protein stability, and pressure tolerance throughout the fish's entire body. Many of these genetic changes had never been documented in any other species, representing genuinely new discoveries about how vertebrate life can adapt to survive extreme pressure at a molecular level. This genetic research carries significance far beyond simply understanding one unusual fish species. Comparing the Hadal snailfish's genome against genomes from related species living in shallower water allows scientists to trace exactly how evolution reshaped this animal's biology over time, identifying specific genetic changes responsible for each remarkable adaptation discussed throughout this story. This comparison essentially provides a genetic roadmap showing evolution in action, captured through the differences between closely related species living in dramatically different environments. Scientists studying this genetic data also hope it might eventually offer practical benefits well beyond deep-sea biology. Genes related to bone development, protein stability, and cellular pressure tolerance could potentially offer valuable insights for medical research here on the surface, particularly regarding human conditions involving bone density, protein misfolding diseases, or other cellular stress-related disorders. This genetic breakthrough represents one of the most significant scientific achievements connected to the Hadal snailfish, transforming it from simply an interesting deep-sea curiosity into a genuinely valuable scientific resource. And the implications of this genetic research extend even further than medicine alone. potentially offering insights relevant to entirely different fields of scientific exploration, including research focused on human survival in extreme environments beyond Earth itself. Chapter 31. Why this genome could unlock secrets for human medicine and space travel. Scientific discoveries rarely stay confined to their original field of study. Groundbreaking research often ripples outward, offering unexpected insights and applications in completely different areas of science. The genetic secrets hidden inside the Hadal snailfish's DNA represent exactly this kind of far-reaching potential, extending well beyond marine biology into fields as different as human medicine and space exploration. Consider the genetic mutation responsible for this fish's incomplete bone hardening. While this trait helps the Hadal snailfish survive crushing ocean pressure, similar genetic pathways exist in human biology as well, controlling how human bones develop and harden throughout childhood and early adulthood. Researchers studying bone disorders, including certain conditions affecting bone density and strength, have expressed interest in understanding exactly how this specific genetic pathway functions in the Hadal snailfish, hoping this knowledge might eventually inform treatments for human patients dealing with bone-related medical conditions. Similarly, understanding TMAO and its ability to protect proteins from collapsing under extreme pressure carries significant potential medical relevance. Numerous human diseases involve proteins losing their proper shape and function, a process closely related to what TMAO prevents in deep-sea creatures. Researchers studying conditions linked to protein misfolding have taken notice of this natural chemical defense system, wondering whether similar protective compounds, or a deeper understanding of how TMAO works, might eventually contribute to new treatment approaches for these serious human diseases. Beyond direct medical applications, understanding extreme pressure adaptation carries relevance for an entirely different frontier: human space exploration. Extended space travel exposes the human body to serious physical stress, including changes in pressure, radiation exposure, and significant challenges to bone density during extended time spent in low-gravity environments. Some researchers studying extreme biology suggest that lessons learned from creatures like the Hadal snailfish, animals that have already solved complex problems related to extreme physical stress, might eventually offer unexpected insights relevant to protecting human astronauts during long-term space missions. This connection might initially sound like a significant stretch, comparing life at the bottom of the ocean to conditions found in outer space. However, both environments share a surprising number of underlying challenges: extreme physical stress on the body, the need for specialized chemical protection at a cellular level, and significant departures from the relatively comfortable, moderate conditions most of Earth's surface life evolved to handle. Solutions nature already developed for one extreme environment sometimes translate surprisingly well toward understanding entirely different extreme environments. This broader potential explains why interest in the Hadal snailfish extends so far beyond marine biology alone. Government agencies focused on space exploration, along with medical researchers studying entirely unrelated human diseases, have both expressed genuine interest in findings coming out of Hadal's own research, recognizing that nature often develops elegant solutions to problems human science is still actively working to solve. This story illustrates something important about scientific research more broadly. Discoveries made purely out of curiosity, driven by a simple desire to understand an unusual creature living in an extreme environment, often end up providing far broader value than anyone initially expected. The Hadal snailfish was not studied because scientists specifically hoped to cure human diseases or improve space travel. It was studied because researchers were curious about a strange, remarkable fish, and that curiosity opened doors nobody could have fully predicted in advance. This pattern of unexpected scientific value raises an important final question. If a single fish species discovered relatively recently already offers this much potential insight, what else might still be hiding in the vast, largely unexplored regions of the Hadal zone still waiting to be discovered? Chapter 32. The Unexplored. 80% of the Hadal zone still hiding secrets. Despite everything scientists have already learned about the Hadal snailfish and the broader ecosystem surrounding it, a striking fact remains at the center of ongoing deep-sea research. The vast majority of the Hadal zone, roughly 80% by most current estimates, remains completely unexplored by human researchers. Every remarkable discovery covered throughout this story represents only a small fraction of what likely exists in this hidden world. This staggering gap in exploration comes down to the same fundamental challenge discussed earlier: the extreme difficulty and cost involved in reaching these depths safely. Unlike shallow coastal waters, which researchers can study relatively easily, using standard diving equipment or simple research vessels, Hadal trenches require specialized submersibles, expensive equipment, and highly trained crews capable of handling the serious risks involved in operating at crushing depths. Ocean trenches also exist in scattered, isolated locations around the globe, rather than forming one single connected region. Major trenches include locations across the Pacific Ocean, along with additional trenches found near other coastlines worldwide. Each individual trench represents its own separate, isolated deep-sea environment, potentially home to unique species that evolved independently, adapted specifically to the exact conditions found within that particular trench. This isolation raises an exciting possibility for future research. Since the Hadal snailfish itself was only formally identified relatively recently, and since so much of the Hadal zone remains completely unexplored, scientists strongly suspect additional undiscovered species are likely still waiting to be found, hidden within trenches that have never been directly studied by researchers equipped with modern, deep-sea technology. Some ongoing research projects have already begun expanding beyond the Mariana Trench, exploring other deep trenches located throughout the Pacific Ocean and beyond. Early results from these expeditions continue revealing new species, confirming scientists' expectations that the Hadal zone holds significantly more biological diversity than previously assumed. Some estimates suggest thousands of species living in these trenches remain completely undocumented by modern science. This ongoing discovery process highlights an important truth about scientific exploration more broadly. Even in an era defined by advanced technology, detailed satellite mapping, and seemingly complete global exploration, entire ecosystems remain essentially unknown, hidden not by distance in the traditional sense, but by the sheer physical difficulty of reaching them safely. Every new expedition into an unexplored trench carries the potential for discoveries as significant as the Hadal snailfish itself. Animals potentially holding their own unique genetic secrets, chemical adaptations, or survival strategies never previously documented anywhere else. Some of these undiscovered species might live even deeper than the current depth record, potentially challenging existing theoretical limits regarding how deep vertebrate life can actually survive. This incomplete picture of the Hadal zone leaves the door open for genuinely significant discoveries still waiting to happen, potentially reshaping scientific understanding of biological limits once again, just as the Hadal snailfish itself did when researchers first confirmed its existence. This vast unexplored frontier represents one of the last true mysteries remaining on our own planet, hidden not on some distant world, but right here on Earth, beneath miles of dark, crushing ocean water most people will never see with their own eyes. Chapter 33: What Could Be Waiting. Even deeper, in trenches never explored. Every discovery covered throughout this story, the soft bones, the protective chemistry, the strange partial eyesight, the entire hidden ecosystem thriving without sunlight, ultimately leads toward one final, unanswered question. If life managed to adapt this successfully to conditions once assumed completely impossible, what else might be surviving in places scientists have not yet managed to reach at all? The Hadal snailfish currently holds the record as the deepest known vertebrate on the entire planet, but scientists studying pressure tolerance acknowledge this record could theoretically be broken. Calculations regarding TMAO and protein stability suggest life might be capable of surviving slightly deeper than current confirmed sightings, existing right at the outer boundary of where complex biological chemistry can still function under crushing pressure. Some of the deepest trenches on Earth remain almost completely unstudied, hidden in remote regions rarely visited by research expeditions due to their extreme distance from major research facilities and the enormous cost involved in reaching them. Within these unexplored trenches, entirely unknown species could be living right now, adapted through millions of years of isolated evolution. completely unknown to modern science. This possibility connects to a bigger scientific question extending far beyond Earth's own oceans. If chemosynthesis and specialized pressure adaptation allow complex ecosystems to thrive without sunlight in extreme environments here on our own planet, similar processes could theoretically support life in comparable extreme environments found elsewhere across our solar system. Icy moons hidden within our solar system, believed to contain vast, sunless oceans beneath thick surface ice, suddenly seem slightly less impossible as potential locations for life, given everything scientists have already confirmed about survival in Earth's own Hadal Zone. This connection between deep Earth trenches and distant alien oceans represents one of the most exciting frontiers currently being explored in modern science. Every adaptation discovered in creatures like the Hadal snailfish provides real, concrete evidence supporting the idea that life can adapt successfully to conditions once assumed completely impossible, strengthening scientific arguments for actively searching for life in similarly extreme environments beyond our own planet. The Hadal snailfish's story ultimately represents something larger than one unusual, remarkable fish. It stands as living proof that life consistently finds ways to survive in places once considered entirely off-limits, using strategies far stranger and more creative than anyone previously imagined possible. Soft bones instead of hard armor, protective chemistry instead of raw strength, partial vision instead of complete blindness. Every single adaptation challenges assumptions scientists once treated as absolute rules governing biology. This story does not end with a clear, final conclusion, because the deepest parts of our planet remain genuinely unfinished chapters in ongoing scientific exploration. Every year, new expeditions push further into unexplored trenches, using increasingly advanced technology capable of reaching depths previously considered impossible to study directly. Each new expedition carries genuine potential for discoveries as remarkable, and possibly even more extreme, than everything covered throughout this entire story. 6 miles beneath the waves, in complete darkness, under pressure strong enough to crush steel, life continues finding a way forward. And somewhere out there, in trenches human eyes have never seen, something else might be waiting, patiently surviving conditions we still barely understand, holding secrets about the true limits of life on this planet that science has not yet even begun to imagine.